Welcome to our Beyond Stregoneria course, also known as Stregoneria 201. This week's module 1, is about defensive and protective magic. So there is no aspect of our lives in which pure magic does not reside. We've said several times in the Stregoneria 101 course that one of the things that makes our practice different from more ritualistic magic or neo-pagan pop culture magic is that we believe that everything we do is inextricably tied to our practice of magic. And so with great power comes great responsibility. See, whether we're a practitioner of magic or not, everyone's susceptible to energetic attacks. The primary difference is that our ancestors, as practitioners, knew how to safeguard themselves against such attacks or reverse attacks when they occur. And there's a reason that the white lighters, particularly their sacrosanct leaders, should not be trusted. And we're going to talk about that in this lesson as we look a little bit more deeply at safeguarding ourselves and the process of reversing magics that take place in our lives. You see, the responsibility to defend and to restore order and balance has been a part of our tradition for as long as we can imagine. Looking back, people have turned to us when vexed by illness or hex or injustice because they knew that we were the ones who could take care of that. Baneful magic is not about bringing harm for harm's sake. It's about justice. And so our magic is always about justice. Justice never has time to be petty. It's about setting things right. So when someone does harm, we set it right. Now, the choice is ours, whether we set things right in a very nice and very gentle way, or we set things right in a more aggressive way, depending on the situation. There can't be sort of a judgment or shaming for the way in which somebody feels best to establish or reestablish balance or justice or homeostasis in their experience. We're having our experience, others are having theirs. So this is why I wanted to start the advanced course with a look at the reasons we need to ward our space. And over the next couple weeks, some of the magic that we talk about and some of the rituals that we talk about and ways that we're going to talk about protecting ourselves are going to be focused on 4 primary types of energetic attacks or magic. The first type is offended spirits acting in retribution for our own carelessness. The second is stepping unprepared into workings and realms that we were not properly prepared or trained for. The third is broken commitments, especially broken commitments to our spiritual allies. And the fourth is attacks by our own. And I'll explain a little bit about what I mean by that. So first, let's talk about offended spirits. We need to understand that the workings that we undertake are serious, that we don't do a ritual or a spell or prepare a potion or cream or tincture sort of willy-nilly. We do this with mindfulness and we do this with very specific intention. So when we're doing that kind of working, we should understand that we have to have a relationship with the spirits of the plants, the spirits of place and of time. If we have spiritual allies from other realms working with us, do we have relationships with them? Is that relationship strong enough that we can be confident in our working, that the working is mutually agreed upon? Are commitments being made? And if those commitments are being made, are we sure we're going to be able to keep our part? So before we talk about, staying in your own lane culturally, we're going to talk about that in a moment. But the first 3 points are really kind of important because they are all about understanding that magic or magical workings is about relationship. Now, some people believe that they can invoke or summons spiritual entities against their will. Others do not believe that. Some believe that it's okay to do that. Others don't believe that. I'm not here to debate any of that with you. I can tell you that I've never found it necessary to invoke any spiritual being against their will. What pop culture would refer to and traditional religion might refer to as angelic or demonic. I have never had to coerce or force a relationship, and that's because I don't want to. We'll talk about it in our class discussion. But I don't want to force anyone to do anything that they don't want to do. I would rather focus on cultivating relationships. And in cultivating the relationships, these entities, these spirits, these energies agree to work with us just like your friends would agree to work with you if there's a synergy there. So for me, it's all about expediency and doing the thing that's most efficient. And it's more efficient to work with entities or spirits or energies that like you than it is to have to coerce those that don't know you or don't like you. And so that means staying in your lane culturally. And we stay in our lane culturally too by not being the type of person who feels they have to jump from tradition to tradition to tradition, taking what they want from those traditions without acknowledging where the tradition comes from or why the tradition is done in that way. Now, I don't mean that those who are not Italian can't practice the tradition that the Italians and Sicilians practiced, because we know that our traditions were also influenced by our ancestors who came from Africa. And so spiritual tradition is always evolving. But what we need to understand is that we have to understand the reason that traditions came about, the reason that particular propitiations might take place, certain offerings might be made. When we understand the reasoning behind it culturally, we can then bring respect to our practice. And so if we change something in the practice, it's changed because our relationship with that particular spirit or energy is uniquely ours. But when that happens, we have to recognize that the relationship I have with Orunmila is not even remotely the kind of relationship that one of his sons would have in the African traditional religions or the Afro-Caribbean traditions. When I make an offering and do a working with Oshun, it's not the same type of working or offering or relationship that one of her children would have. So that's what I mean when I say staying in our lane culturally. And so that first classification is that we may have offended spirits, and so there might be attacks from those offended spirits that we just out of ignorance didn't do the right things, or we culturally appropriated, or we didn't show respect in a proper way, and that comes from not having a relationship. This second step, stepping into realms unprepared, is very similar to that. You see, if we're not ready to do the work, chances are it's because we've not learned the things that we need to learn before doing the work. So I can tell you right now that some of those that are in this course have not done the work. They've been through all the classes. They've listened to all the lectures. They may have taken copious notes, but they've not done the work. And the reason the Stregoneria 101 course is designed to take one concept every 2 weeks and then work with it for 7 to 14 days before moving on, as opposed to taking one concept every 3 days, as some people try to do, to rush through the process, the reason we do that is because it builds truly builds a practice, a character, an awareness that's not possible in any shorter period of time. And because we're allowing over the course of that year, we're allowing the lunar cycles also to work within us. We're allowing our own magic, our own DNA to be stimulated. So if you're in this class and you feel, as you look back honestly, that you might have kind of rushed through the class, or maybe your full attention wasn't there, or maybe the respect wasn't there for the material that you were learning, and so every time you learned something, you had to try and disprove it by going to Wikipedia and looking at something written by someone who has no authority or background to talk about such things. If you found yourself doing that, then it means you need to go back to the 101 course now and do it properly. You could stay in this Beyond Stregoneria course, because the magic and the unlocking of your DNA that's going to take place in the 101 course will work simultaneously with what's being taught here. This is more of the practical aspects, and that's the foundation. So you need the foundation, and you'll find that the more that you actually put that effort into the 101 course, the more effective your practice becomes, because it's being built on a strong foundation. So doing magic to impress means the ego opens you up to danger or vulnerabilities. So that might mean, telling somebody you're going to lead them on journey work when you haven't really done enough journey work yourself to understand it. That might mean, doing a ritual because it's going to look clever or beautiful. You could go on Facebook and you could see people who are constantly showing pictures of their altars, constantly showing pictures of ritual in action. And that opens them to vulnerabilities that would otherwise not happen. You may see photos when I talk about how to do a certain working, when I talk about how to do a certain ritual. I will go on the internet specifically to find other people who were foolish enough to put pictures of their ritual, and I'll use that picture because I don't want any vulnerabilities left, open on a ritual that I'm doing. And so you see people doing that all the time, and they do it because they want to impress you. Oh, let me show you my altar. Let me show you my shrine. Let me show you my, candle magic, or my sigil. And we don't want to do that, because that's stepping into a realm unprepared. Also, if you're stepping into another realm and you haven't properly protected yourself, you're really vulnerable. So just remember that knowledge isn't impressive when it's not rooted in wisdom, when it's rooted in arrogance or a need to show off. The next concept is actually the concept of paying the price. If you've made a commitment and that commitment is not kept, then you're very susceptible to attack. So if you make an agreement with plant spirits, or with one of the ancient ancestors, or one of your direct ancestors, immediate ancestors, and then you don't follow through on your part, you're going to open yourself up to attack, just like you might with spirits that you disrespected unintentionally. This is an intentional or a willful neglect. So the attacks are usually stronger. And so I like to say, this will kind of out me as a geek for those who haven't figured that out yet, that in the anime cartoon Full Metal Alchemist, they talk about the first principle of alchemy, the law of equivalent exchange. And I quote that because it's such a beautiful way of expressing this. And it says, humankind cannot gain anything without first giving something in return. To obtain something of equal value must be lost. That's alchemy's first law of equivalent exchange. And it is true. It is kind of the foundational principle of the work that we do. In order to gain something, we give something. So just as our baneful work is about restoring balance and justice, anything that we're doing, any magic, is an exchange of energy. And that's why we're able to control the energy around circumstances and people and conditions and places and objects, because we're making that equivalent exchange. And then I call that last classification attacks by our own, and I mean by human beings. So under this classification would be attacks by witches that you know or witches that you don't know. Attacks by witches on behalf of someone else who may or may not be a magical practitioner. Self-initiated shadow attacks and non-magical attacks of any kind. And I'll talk about those briefly. So attacks by witches you know could be out of jealousy, could be out of spite, could be out of just an animus that somebody has over something that you did. And if you leave yourself unwarded and unprotected, those attacks can happen. Attacks by witches on behalf of someone else is when someone goes to a witch. They themselves might be a practitioner, they might not be a practitioner, it doesn't matter. When they go to a witch whose work is doing baneful work, and they say, I need you to do a spell for, to so-and-so, and that witch does it for whatever reason. I'm not here to make a judgment on whether doing baneful magic without knowing the reason that it's being done is wise or not. That's a practitioner's choice, and that's part of the witch's sovereignty, and I'll always protect that. But I'm here to tell you that that if you yourself are doing baneful work on behalf of someone else and you're not properly protecting yourself, then you are creating vulnerabilities that could really harm you more than the person who asked you to do the work. When I say self-initiated shadow attacks, what I mean there is that there are some people either for ego because they need the attention, either for victimhood because they love to look like they're, poor me, poor me, poor me, or because of their own spiritual immaturity, initiate or create what I call shadow attacks. And shadow attacks are when people allow their neuroses to manifest in the form of a physical shadow. They see these shadow people everywhere. Oh, they're out of the corner of my eye, I see a shadow and it's here to get me. Or, oh, I woke up at the middle of the night or at 3 a.m. and there was a shadow person standing at the end of my bed. So these kinds of attacks are not actually attacks. They're invitations from our higher consciousness to do shadow work, to roll our sleeves up and get willing to be uncomfortable, to ask ourselves, what is this that's manifesting in my world as shadow? And what can I learn from this? What can I forgive? How can I move beyond this? So those attacks are actually the easiest ones to fix because we're the ones that actually initiated the attack, and it's not really an attack. It's a wake-up call or a cry for attention. Now be careful if it's a cry for attention, because in cases like that, what you're doing is signaling to the rest of the world that you're spiritually immature and that you'll say or do anything to get attention or to get pity. And that becomes a vulnerability that someone else can use against you. So they could manifest shadow attacks or draw on spiritual energies or spirits within your own home that'll manifest and scare the hell out of you. And then non-magical attacks of any kind are injustices, whether it's police brutality or racism or gender bias or homophobia or just having a boss who's a dick and is unfair to you in some way. Those kinds of attacks manifesting in your life means there's a spiritual imbalance there and you haven't properly protected yourself. And it's not about blame. It's about understanding the cause so that you can remove it or reverse it. And so in our discussion this week, we're going to talk about why we do what we do to protect ourselves and why over the next few weeks We're going to be doing some rituals that I think are not just about having good knowledge, but having a skill set that we can take with us to protect ourselves frequently. Because as you see on the screen, a quote that I love from Alan Turing, the British computer scientist and a member of the queer community, Turing said, "We can only see a short distance ahead, but we can see plenty there that needs to be done." And that's what this is about. It's that staying in the moment, looking for what needs to be cleaned up around us right here and right now. And when we do that, when we're in the moment, there is no vulnerability. Now, in the moment, we can see the attacks that have occurred, that may have occurred just a few minutes ago or a few days ago or a few months ago, because we weren't in the moment. So at the core of what we do, it's about staying in the moment. But that's a practice of mindfulness that takes time. And so in the meantime, we're going to be talking for the next couple weeks about steps you can take to ward and protect yourself against attacks. And you'll start to experience some of those things, whether it's headaches that feel like the Maloikyo coming on, whether it's just a little bit of chaos in your life, or a business downturn, or people arguing and fighting with you on social media. This is a period of time when you're taking the next step on the path, and the next step on the path leads to reclaiming more of your power. And so that's why we see crazy people saying we're a cult, or you should leave, or you should join the temple of whatever. Because they know that what you're about to do is become even more empowered, so that you don't need me, you don't need them, you don't need gurus, you don't need anyone but yourself. Because that's the source of your power. And it always was. So in our discussion, we're going to talk about these concepts and talk about why, and talk about some of the things that you can do to begin to ward yourself in a very simple way. And over the next couple of weeks, we're going to talk about specific rituals that you can do that sort of take things from the 101 course to the next level.